On April 28th of 1997, the city of Thousand Oaks, California was considered one of the safest places to live in the country by the FBI. It was a utopia in America until 10:20 a.m. That's when Thousand Oaks and Los Angeles County were never the same. On that Monday at Western Financial Bank, there was a manager and 3 tellers. There was no security guard, no locking the front door. There was no plexiglass to protect or separate employees. The tellers were sitting ducks when 2 armed men walked in. They had nylon stockings over their faces, and they were disguised as construction workers. They had reflective vests on to draw attention away from their faces. The robbers got all the employees into the back room, in front of the safe. Bank teller Monica Leech was ordered to open it. It would be the last thing she ever did. She led them to the vault, gave them the money, and did everything they demanded, and for unknown reasons, one of the 2 men held a gun to the back of her head and shot her. Monica was the only one who was shot. She succumbed to her injuries on the vault room floor. To the robbers, her life was worth a few $1,000s. They got away with $9 grand. Shortly after this brutal crime, local banks and donors raised $160,000 in reward money for whoever turned in the suspects. There was surveillance video. The images weren't great, but they were still usable. Witness descriptions also helped produce composite sketches. Police even got the getaway car, and yet no arrests. The case sadly went cold. Monica's husband, Floyd Leech, spoke publicly in 2021 about the crime. He was 43 years old back in 1997. Floyd said that Thousand Oaks was a place where people left their doors unlocked. It is where he lived for most of his life and where he met his second wife, Monica. That morning, she left for work and we gave each other a kiss and said, "See you later." She walked out of the door to go to her job, and I walked out of the door to go to my job, he said. I think about it a lot. Every time I talk to one of her kids, it comes back. Her kids now have kids. I'm still close with all of her family, Floyd Leech said. Monica and Floyd met in church. Their love blossomed beautifully and naturally. It was the first time Floyd felt happy in months. 6 months prior, my first wife had passed of a medical condition, so we started hanging around together and then started dating. 7 months after we started dating, we got married. When Monica and I decided to get married, my oldest son said, "You're not going to replace my mom," and she said, "I'm not trying to." And then shortly after that, they got very, very close. My second son was always close with her. Monica was very instrumental in helping my boys out as well as her own family. We didn't have any his and hers. I loved her kids, she loved my kids, and it worked out very, very well. Monica worked in banking for 20 years. After she got married to Floyd, to become closer to home, she transferred to Western Financial Bank. This is what Floyd said about the crime. It wasn't a video game that you can just reset and make it all back the way it was. She was a real person. She was very loving and loved her family and her kids. I believe that if people do bad things, they need to pay for what they do. Getting those guys would just close a chapter in my life. Not the memories, but as far as closing the chapter of wondering where these guys are and what they're doing today, Floyd said. Investigators for many years were convinced the 2 men were members of the Crips gang. To get a better understanding of why investigators believe this, Dr. Georgia Leap was interviewed to explain. She is a professor at the University of California, Los Angeles, and has been working with gangs for 40 years. The Crips are really one of the oldest gangs in the Southwest Angeles area. Their roots are very much here. Ironically, they have spread all over the world. I've met Crips gang members from Australia. I think it's significant to add that while their reputation lies in the fact that they've been involved in gang activity and criminal behavior, they've also been involved in some significant social services. To understand the Crips is to understand a very lengthy, very complex picture of street organization that began in the Southern California area, Leech said. What happened in South Los Angeles is the factories that were nearby on Alameda Street began to close down, and job opportunities and income narrowed significantly. When those factories closed in the 1970s, thousands of people lost their jobs, and the area never recovered, Leech said. The same decade, California voters approved Prop 13. That was a big win for homeowners. It capped property tax increases, but it meant a huge cut to programs that those taxes paid for, like school programs, law enforcement, and social services. Many joined gangs to make some money. In the late 80s to the early 90s, in order to make money, the Crips largely sold drugs. The gang generally made enough money to get by. What radically changed the game, according to Crips member Perry Dideau, was the movie Point Break. He says what the movie did is give a blueprint to some kids on how to rob a bank. And just like that, seemingly overnight, Southern California became the bank robbery capital of the country. Captain Eric Buschow with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department explained, "There are banks on virtually every corner throughout Southern California. A lot of them are located in convenient places where it's easy to get off the freeway and stop in and take care of a transaction, especially going back before ATMs. Banks invested in security, based on certain branches being frequent targets of robberies. The ones that were either less frequently robbed or virtually never robbed, that might have been a little further outlying and not right next to a freeway corridor, there was less investment in security," said Buschow. During the 90s, Southern California became the Wild West. At its peak in 1992, the FBI estimates more than 2,600 banks were robbed. That's an average of 7 banks per day. And instead of fighting each other in South Los Angeles, gangs started venturing to places like Thousand Oaks. That was their preferred method of getting money, was going around doing these takeover robberies, you know? The FBI had numerous cases throughout Southern California that were part of an organized criminal street gang, said Buschow. Captain Buschow also talked more about Monica's case specifically in 2021. "We don't often see something go this long without the right pieces of information coming into our lab, especially at the time with that larger award." There were banks that came together and put up money to encourage people to come forward. The vehicle was later recovered. They repainted it. We have those pieces of evidence. We have those handcuffs. We have the evidence collected from inside the bank. We just need to get all those last couple of pieces to carry this cross to the goal line, said Buschow. Also, in 2021, with advances in DNA technology, it seemed like the case will finally be solved. Christina Tekatlane, who is a forensic scientist and local CODIS administrator for Ventura County Sheriff's Office Forensic Service Bureau, explained the process. Touch DNA is when somebody basically touches an item and deposits some of their cells onto it. These cells have considerably less DNA in them than body fluids like blood or saliva. So with technology advancing over the years, it's gotten a lot more sensitive to be able to detect smaller amounts of DNA. This has become very helpful in cases where the only evidence available is touch DNA. On March 14th of 2023, authorities announced that 55-year-old Kevin Ray James was arrested in connection with Monica's case. He was arrested 5 days earlier on March 9th in San Bernardino, California, and charged with taking Monica's life. James was transported and booked into Ventura County Jail. James apparently lived in the Los Angeles area at the time of the robbery and was described as a gang member during the news conference. Authorities stressed that they still have not identified the second suspect involved in the robbery. A $30,000 FBI reward for information on that person remains in place, as does a $100,000 reward from Crime Stoppers. Anyone with information about the case or the second suspect is asked to call the Sheriff's Office Major Crime Bureau at 805-383-8704 or email them at coldcase@ventura.org. Ventura County District Attorney Eric Nasarenko had this to say at the news conference. This was a senseless, unprovoked, and vicious crime. He added that Monica Leech grew up in the Somis community of Ventura County, was a proud graduate of Rio Mesa High School, and came from a banking family. She liked needlepoint and going for walks in the morning and was described as a beloved wife, daughter, and mother who helped raise 4 children. Dr. Rick Schwartzberg is a chiropractor who had an office next to the bank where Monica worked and got to know her well in the 2 months that she worked there. He said, "It was definitely a normal day at first, at least I thought it was. In between patients, I'd often go over to my office, which overlooked the parking lot. And that's when I saw somebody just barrel right by my office super fast. It was unusual. So I took note, but I didn't hear anything, so I went and saw the next patient in the room. That's when I got the call immediately to come out because one of the tellers was there saying that Monica had been shot. Everybody was saying, is there anything you can do to help? I said, I can try. During the CPR part, obviously, maybe for a second it looked like things might be improving, but it was pretty rapidly apparent that it wasn't.